again, the old way to influence the public was to develop your brand, goes to the mass media to reach an audience. But today, you're communicating out to the public, but they're communicating with each other. They're blogging, they're talking about what you're doing, talking about your product or cause. And so you've got to figure out a way to insert yourself into that conversation and influence the conversation by arming your supporters with materials that they can use when they talk to others, and also giving them tools to sort of speak to your opponents. And the biggest challenge is it requires you to lose some element of control. And it's something that every campaign that would work with and every corporation that would work with always grapples with. How do I give consumers some element of control, or at least the perception of control, without losing the game and having them deliver messages that are contradictory to the ones I want to communicate in the marketplace? This is especially true for some of the pharmaceutical clients that we work with, where sometimes they're not just worried about people saying things that are off message or things that are bad about us. We're also worried about people saying things that are good about us, that may not be things that the FDA has approved that we can say. So it creates a whole new challenge for certain clients when people are saying things in a way that you're not controlling. It also means that people have tools not only to promote you, but also to tear you down. And as you all remember, maybe from the 1984 Hillary Clinton ad that a kid built over the weekend, where that was sort of the dominant news story for several days. I mean, how does the campaign deal with that? And then the other thing also is that sometimes these conversations will live forever, because someone may post something on a blog, they may bring it down the next day, or even your campaign or your product, one of your product managers may say something, and the reality is, again, it may live forever. You can always find it, so you're stuck with that for a very long time. So anyway, let's just talk a little bit about the basics of how a grassroots campaign might work. So the first step in any kind of grassroots effort is to identify and then cultivate a stakeholder base. The first piece of this is identifying who your supporters are. It's going through your existing network of customers, employees, often your alumni, and building a common database that you can then do outreach from. And it also means going out there and finding new supporters. Now, it isn't a matter of convincing people that they should be passionate about your brand or product or candidate. It's finding people who are already passionate about you and then bringing them into your network. Then you want to give them opportunity to spread the word, and you want to make it as easy as possible. And it also needs to be calibrated as to who they are. In any group of stakeholders, let's say you've got 10,000 people who care about TiVo. And you've got 5,000 TiVo users who may have bought a TiVo. Maybe what they'll do is they'll pass on a message occasionally. But you've got maybe 1,000 people who live and die about TiVo. They just tell all the friends about it every single day. Well, you want to be speaking to them in very different ways. You don't want to ask 1,000 people to do really big things for you, for something very small on a repeated basis. You just ask them for very big asks at the end. But you don't want to don't want to alienate the 5,000 people who may have peripheral interest in you on lots of really big things. Because if you ask them for something really big, they'll just turn you out and zone you out. So you need to sort of calibrate your asks to the user, to the stakeholder. And then you need to also make the ask authentic. Again, if you're doing your job well and you ask your stakeholder base to do something, they're not doing it as a favor to you. They're doing it because they care. So you've got to make the ask authentic, and you have to make it appropriate. And then the last piece is you have to measure everything over and over again. And this is often one of the most challenging things in grassroots campaigns is how to measure something. Especially if you're asking people to do things that are offline. If you're doing things online, it's pretty easy. I can look to see what messages people click through. I can see what they forward on. But if you're asking people to do things in the real world, that's a lot more difficult. It's also often the most effective, because we often tell our clients that you want to use online tools to promote real world action. But then you also want to have something built into the offline action that can be measured in a way that you can act on. And so that's often the difficult part of running a grassroots campaign.